Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of Nurture Notes with me, Naomi Aidoo, author and YouVersion partner. I am so delighted that you are here. I want to jump in before we begin and ask that you would subscribe here to Nurture Notes here on YouTube, and a special request to subscribe because it was my birthday yesterday. And so a special present for me would be your subscription here on the YouTube channel. I so appreciate it, especially if you're enjoying these notes. I really am encouraged by your responses to the email Nurture Notes that you receive and your comments here on YouTube. Just your feedback is always really helpful. And so I want to jump in. We're in Luke 9 and 10 this week. You'll know that we spent the last 2 weeks in Luke 8 because there's kind of been a bit of a theme, and that theme doesn't stop. We've got a kind of concluding theme around action today in Luke 9 and 10, which we can't escape, let's be honest. In Luke 9, Jesus sends out the 12. In Luke 10, he sends out the 72. And so we really can't escape this notion of authority to act. We're being sent, right? And we can see this. So if you want to look at the sending out of the 12, it's in Luke 9 from verses 1 to verse 9. And then if you want to look at the sending out of the 72, it's in Luke 10 from verse 1 to verse 23. Mission is very clear. There is just this sense of go. And what I love is at the very beginning, so Luke 9:1, when Jesus had called the 12 together, he gave them power and authority to drive out all demons and cure diseases. And then he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and heal the sick. So before the being sent, there's that authority that is given. And so I just want us to remember that as we go through this nurture note today, because mission is very clear. And when we think about mission and being sent and this essentially this idea of action in and of our own strength, we might cause ourselves and ask ourselves, well, who am I? I'm so weak and I just feel tired. I've got 1,000,001 things to do, and now I'm being told about authority to act or mission or going. Remember the authority that you have been given and who you have been given it by. As I say this next sentence, just 4 words: you have a responsibility. Now, I wonder what comes up for you when you think about that. You have a responsibility. Not the person who sits next to you at church that you believe is more gifted than you, not your neighbour, not your best friend, although those people also have a responsibility too, but so do you. And I feel like that's something daunting to say, but it's also something daunting to kind of share, because it can feel a little bit like, again, it's another demand in our already demanding lives. But I want us to think about it through this lens. And first of all, it's going to sound a bit egotistical, but I want you to kind of refrain from thinking about it through that lens for a minute, because what if you recognized just how important you truly were? Now, hold up before you're thinking, has this girl gone left? I want you to remember what it says in Luke 9:23 with this lens, because you might think, well, if you're sharing Luke 9:23, then surely the idea that we're not important is actually what we need to list. Listen to what it says, Luke 9:23. Then he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." So Luke 9:23, deny yourself. But what if this is about a perspective on what denying yourself means? Because what if actually in our not going and in our not doing what it is that we're called to do, some of that responsibility of taking up our cross and denying ourselves is not happening? What if we are not dying to discomfort, and we're not dying to the desire to fit in? We're not dying to people pleasing and pressure, perhaps. What does it mean to you to remember that actually it's not what it's about is just to die to ourselves and sit in our room and read our Bible and study and just trust and hope for the best? Because dying to ourselves means a whole lot more than that. Ourselves is also our flesh, the things that we would find that make us feel comfortable, that put us in a position where actually we're fine as we are, and actually doing anything else is a bit too much of a stretch. Think about what your perspective of dying to self looks like, and whether we're truly doing it when we actually think about what it means to just go in his authority. Please do remember that it's his authority that we go in. Because if we're thinking to ourselves, well, dying to discomfort and believing that I've got responsibility in and of our own selves, we'll just think, oh, I can't do it. But it's not just about you. Let's remember Luke 10 verse 19. Again, this is with the 72 now. It says, I've given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. Now, this isn't the be all and end all, because even Jesus then goes on to say, but don't rejoice in those things. But it's important to note. And the reason it's important to note is because if we don't note that, then we can find ourselves just thinking, I'm just going to be stuck. I'm not going to really know what to do. But we know that action is important when we even look at the Good Samaritan. Jesus is telling this teacher of the law this story of the Good Samaritan and all that it means, and asking essentially like, what's a good neighbour? And then Jesus goes on to say that very well-known story that I'm not going to say because most of us will know it, of the Good Samaritan. At the end, though, Jesus asks in verse 36, this is Luke 10:36, which of these three do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. The expert said it was the one who acted, the one who did, not the one who supposedly had somewhere more important to go and something more important to do. It was the one who did. And I think that that really is backing up that point of action that we've been talking about for this whole nurture note, because having good intentions is only half of it. And if still, even with knowing that we go in Jesus' authority and it's not so much about us but about who we are in him, if even then it still feels daunting, I want to end with Mary and Martha. I've written about Mary and Martha extensively, so I'm not going to labour the point here, but essentially Martha's busy. They're two sisters. Martha's really busy doing all the things. Mary's just sitting at Jesus' feet. Martha's getting annoyed, like, tell her to help me, what's going on? I've definitely been a bit of a Martha in my time. And then Jesus says, a few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it won't be taken away. So if you're thinking to yourself, I'm just a bit overwhelmed, this idea of acting, this idea of responsibility that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, this idea of going, this idea of doing what it is that God's called me to do, it just feels a bit much. Remind yourself that actually start where Mary started, sitting at the feet of Jesus, for direction, for clarity, for wisdom, for the banishment of fear and anxiety and anything else that's holding you back from the doing. You will have to get up eventually. We all have to get up eventually, because while we're still here living and breathing, there's work for us to do for the kingdom. But start there. Start at his feet and see where he will take you next as you go and grow towards whatever it is that he's called you to do. Because however old, however young, however timid, however confident, you have a purpose, you have a responsibility, and ultimately you have authority to act. I hope that served you today, and please do drop a comment, share what it is that is coming up for you as you go through this, and please don't forget to subscribe as my little birthday request. And in the meantime, I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for being here. Keep going, keep growing.